Hi everyone, good afternoon. It's great to see some of you here. At least it's not a completely empty room. A nice small group, power group, that's what we're going to be. So you have come to a workshop. That means you'll be working and I'm going to go to the shop. Right? That's the way it should be. We are very close to MG Road after all. So I have a background in software development. I started development in the 1980s. I was doing Agile in the 1990s, and I sort of became a Scrum Master in 2005. So Agile is definitely old, more than 20, 30 years worth. My role these days, I deliver training. I'm a coach, I'm a consultant. I also sometimes, for fun, actually go and work in a team as a more or less either a product owner or a BA. So I've been writing user stories since 2005, when there was no training, no books, no Mike Cohen, Jeff Patton was around, but he hadn't written his book yet. So figuring out user stories was why I came up with this idea and this workshop, because it's not so easy. It sounds easy, but to get it and get them working well is an art form. So definitely when we think of the responsibility of looking after and curating user stories, yes, it sits with the BA or the product owner, but the team are equally responsible. So we're going to talk about some concepts around user stories, some old, some new, some that you probably know, some that you might not know, but we're going to explore them together. And I absolutely invite you to share, to ask questions, to add your feedback at any time. You don't have to wait till the end. Just feel free to interact at any time if you've got something you want to add or ask as we go. So the first thing we're going to do, as I said, it is a workshop. So with the people at your table, just a couple of you that you have, I want you to talk about, firstly, say hello to each other if you haven't already met each other, but don't spend too long on that. Discuss from your experience, from your understanding, what is a user story? Not just as a I want so that, not just that. What is it in its essence? And why do we use them? Why do we use user stories? So based on what you know, where you've come from, how your organisation works, what is it and why do we use them? Give you 5 minutes to discuss. Existing tables, we're in the middle of what is on the screen. You're going to talk about what is a user story and why do we use them. So join in with your group. For the gentleman at the back, Phil, join a table. So who's joining? Join an existing table. We are already started and we are talking about what is a user story and why do we use them. We're already started. So join in with your discussion. We've already started. Is a user story and why do we use them? Joining, yep. We've already started. Please join a table and join in the discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we're going to cover everything. We've got 90 minutes. Right, we're going to move on. Ding, 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 ding. Right, I'm going to ask each table to share what your main conversation was around. So if I can get someone from each table, just one person, to share what you've discussed. I'm going to start with the table here. So what were your discussions? What is a story and why do we use them? Mm-hmm. Yep, perfect. And why do we use them?
To prioritize, to understand the value that user needs.
Sorry, yeah. So we use them to prioritize and
to prioritize and to understand the value, to explain
Understand
the
value.
value. Yeah, what value it's going to add to the entire
nice.
the ecosystem. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we use them to prioritize and understand value. Wonderful, fantastic, great. Over here, what were your thoughts? What is a user story and why do we use them?
Yeah, so user story is mainly to understand the value that the team need to deliver
Yes,
for different personas.
that's right.
Yeah. So, and why do we use them? Is like this is easy for teams to consume within a sprint. So the idea is like whatever we take, like we need to complete within a sprint. So we break that functions into a value-based smaller chunks. So
Perfect. Nice, fantastic. Nice one. Over here, what was some? I know there's a few good. Simo, covered everything. Nice. To allow iterative delivery.
So it's a smallest unit of work which will provide value to the end user and can be completed within a sprint.
Perfect. I love that. And that's important to understand. It's about delivering and breaking it down. Anything extra to add over here?
I would say it's from the user perspective, simple statement. So that defines what the user wants on the business perspective.
That's
not
exactly
not
right.
technical.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So we all kind of know what a user story is. They're simple things. They're invented by Jeff Patton in the story mapping. Such a simple concept. As a user type, user role, customer, whatever, I want some sort of feature, some sort of capability, some sort of goal so that I get some benefit, some sort of value. So we know it's a who, what, why. Who it is that we're delivering for, who needs this, what is it that they need, and why do they need it? Who, what, why. Who, what, why. But what's missing? How. When does the how happen? In the sprint plan, generally speaking. Very good. Nice one. So this is all stuff we know well and truly, but it's always about a few other things that we need to make sure we're thinking about all the time. It's from the perspective of that other, not from the team. So it's from their perspective, what's important to them and what's valuable to them, what their problem is. And the reason we do that is to create empathy. We put ourselves in their shoes. The idea is every person in that team, from a BA, product owner, tester, developer, database analyst, security specialist, whoever it is, we put ourselves in their shoes and look at it from their perspective. It's not just some developer, no, it's for the developers to say, if I was that person, how would I view this problem? How would I view this need? So it's from their perspective. Importantly, it must be a capability that we're providing them. We should be thinking about what kind of actions they might be looking at, what kind of tasks are they trying to complete, what are those activities. So we must be thinking about what is this person trying to do here, and then of course the value. If we achieve this for them, what would be the benefit and the value to them? And of course that value is so critical because that helps us prioritize. I have seen too many teams go, we don't need to use this format anymore. We just put help button, select option X. We're back to requirements. We may as well start doing waterfall again. Sort of, kind of. But the reason we use this format, whilst it can be painful in some ways, it adds value because the so that is so critical. So the team understands that value. And if we can't define the so that, if we can't define the value, why are we writing this? And how are we prioritizing? So good stuff. It's a one-liner, one-line representative of a requirement that the solution must fulfill. It's simple. We don't do extensive detailed specifications anymore. That's not good. That's not, as much as that's where I've come from. We don't write these master specifications anymore because the reason we do user stories is that they're small, they're flexible, they can be prioritized, and they're not detailed so difficultly, so we can wait to the last responsible moment to decide how we're going to do it. And we can use the feedback from previous sprints to understand, do we need to change them? Do they need to be prioritized up, down? New ones come in, old ones go out. We expect that prioritized product backlog to be a living, breathing, heaving, changing thing every sprint. And that's what your sprint review's for. And of course, your backlog refinement sessions are for this purpose. How many of you have effective backlog refinement sessions with your team? A few. This is the biggest thing of Agile that I think is a telling factor of why Agile doesn't work in many cases. Not enough good refinement. It's done in the sprint plan and then it's too late. Anyway, 3 C's. A good old-fashioned, we all learned, perhaps if you've done your Scrum Master course or you've done any sort of Agile course, you learned the 3 C's. What are they? Card, conversation, confirmation. So we do a card. Why do we use the cards? Oh, I'm out for myself. Why do we use cards or sticky notes? Forces us to be succinct. Anything else? Pardon? It's a boundary, that's right, yes. Why else do we use cards? Visual, that's right, it's visual, you can all look at them, that's right. Any other reasons? It helps prioritise. But there's some other amazing good reasons for using a card. Transferable, yes, definitely, that's right. We use a card because we can move them around. They're visual, they're small, they're succinct. But if I give everybody in the room, developer, tester, database analyst, security specialist, the customer themselves, if I furnish everybody in the room with a pad of sticky notes or index cards and a pen or a pencil, who can write user stories? Everybody. And that's what they were meant for. That's how they were invented. They're called user stories, not user requirements. Think about the words for a minute. A story. Do you have children? Do you read to them at night time? Tell them bedtime stories? It's a story. You share it. You experience it together. You don't give them a book and say, go to your room and read. But how are you writing your user stories in your teams? Oh, the BA does it magically in a corner somewhere quiet and then springs them on the team and says, there you go, there's your user story. It's not what they were for. They're for on a card so everybody can contribute. Because we've got that who, what, why, every person in the room can put themselves in the perspective of the customer, the passenger, the salesman, whoever it is. We can put ourselves, if I was that person, what would I want? And because we're using cards, if we get it wrong or if the idea is rubbish, they're easily disposable. And you know what? If 3 people have the same one, well, it's probably quite high priority, right? 3 people have the same idea. It's probably a pretty important thing that we should do. So it's on cards to enable everyone in the team. We write our stories together. Sure, we might need a little bit of background, put some context. You know, the way I always work with my teams is when we're writing user stories, the first thing we do is set the context, create that shared vision, understand some basics around what it is that we're trying to achieve as the whole project and the whole capability. And then we say, okay, based on that background, based on understanding the different kinds of users, let's start. Let's do it together. So that's why they're on cards. That's the reason, number one reason they're on cards, so everybody can write them. And it takes all of 3 minutes to teach anybody, as I once saw that. Even your sales guys can understand it and write user stories. Conversation. Again, I've already explained that one. They are meant to be a conversation we have now about what we're trying to achieve and a further conversation later to confirm how we're going to do it. So there's two versions, a conversation now and a placeholder for a detailed conversation about when we are doing the work and we're going to deliver it. And then confirmation, what does that one mean? Agreement, Talk, yeah. Acceptance criteria. And again, acceptance criteria, not focusing too much on that in this class, but it's its own nightmare, generally speaking, done very poorly throughout the whole world. So don't worry, it's everywhere. It's not just here or not just in Australia. It's a confirmation to say, how will we know that the user can give me a thumbs up and say yes? So we might note some acceptance criteria at the story writing time, but then we might do more detailed acceptance criteria as this story gets higher priority and we start really wanting to drill in. But we should also, the other part of confirmation is that we have a shared and common understanding within the team of what this is. Who's the user, what's the goal, and what's the value to them. So the confirmation should be that shared understanding, which is also another point. So, oh, there you go. See, I had on the slide all along. So it's all about understanding. That's why the 3 C's exist. And that was the inspiration of why I came up with the 3 S's, because realistically, these were the only guidances, except for, I don't think I put invest. No, I didn't put invest up. Invest, how many of you heard of invest? That's from Bill Wake. Back at DSDM days, again, there's more than Scrum in the universe, just putting it out there. I come from a non-Scrum background. I did RAD and DSDM in the 90s, and then I learned Scrum in 2005. But Bill Wake came up with invest, independent, variable, estimatable, small, testable, blah, blah, blah. These are not great guidelines of how to get user stories right. So back into your discussion groups. So for those who have joined, oh, you've got someone at the table. If you're by yourself, maybe join another group. And your job now is to discuss what are the problems. I mean, I'm sure you don't have much problems with them, but if you had problems with user stories, what kind of problems have you experienced in your teams? What real examples have you got of where user stories haven't worked for you? I'll give you a few moments to share. Sharing and care. Sharing is caring. What are the problems you've experienced? Any examples you want to share? And be prepared for someone to share. I'll give you 5 minutes to talk, to have a chat about. What are the problems you've experienced, if any? Hey, yeah. It's going. It's a nice group over there in the colours. Harry.
Actually, we discussed a very important point. The biggest challenge that I am facing right now in for one of my squads is on the UX stories. So UX, she creates a user story, and also the UI guys, the development guys are also planning the same user stories, the related user stories for that same sprint. So that I got a suggestion from Sophie that it should not be done. Because UX, when they are trying to develop some screens, and it is again the screens, the finalization of the screens, the acceptance of the screens, it's very difficult, because I may like something, some design, some screen, you may like a different, you may be expecting something different. So that what happens is it goes for an interaction, and the user story doesn't get completed in that particular sprint, due to which the development task that we have planned based on those UX stories, that goes for a toss. So this
Yes. So disconnect, definitely a lack of collaboration. That's 100% the problem there. There's no, let's round table it first and get some shared understanding, and then we start. There's a lot of, again, this is not a Agile end-to-end 100% course, but again, we need to sit together, and UX stories don't exist. They're acceptance criteria of an existing story, and that's another anti-pattern we see too many times. But I can see you're going to give me some food for thought. What are your thoughts? Yeah. Because UX, look and feel, is acceptance criteria. The actual capability is the user story. They must sit together. They shouldn't be separated. And if it should be done collaboratively. We talk first. The UX person is working directly with the product owner and the developer. If we've got these silos existing, they should be working together in the sprint planning session, potentially, to do the full elaboration together, and then the work gets done. Not, hey, we do the story and then we come back and do a UX miracle over the top of it. No. Shouldn't be. It should be done at the same time. But again, how do we structure our teams? And there's a lot of stuff about how we should work it and create backlogs in the first place. They don't happen that you write stories forever. There should be some pieces that show you the big picture, and we have clear ideas about look and feel as a standard, and foundations as a standard, and all that stuff. They should be happening before we even start sprinting, some of the fundamental stuff. But that's not what this session's all about. But definitely one I see too often, it's definitely many of these kinds of anti-patterns. I'm going to go, where's the mic? Oh, where's the mic? Over here to the next table down. Some of the problems you have experienced.
So one of the statement was like over communicating the requirement. So it will become too prescriptive that sometimes it takes out the room for innovation. So that is one challenge we discussed about. So sometimes the rigid mentality
as a user, I want a button in the bottom left of the screen that's X number of pixels, blah 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 blah, so that I can push the button.
Absolutely.
This is not a user story.
Yeah.
This is a how, not a what. Yeah, nice.
Yes.
Very common.
Yeah. So sometimes, the technical resources can kind of come up with a better solution to the...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole idea of user stories is
Yeah.
to give them the intent and let the experts figure out the best way to achieve it. Nice one. Yep.
Yes,
Common problem?
And in most of the in stories, like what we've observed is the why part is missing. Actually, that's the value we are trying to deliver, but that why is missing, in most of the scenarios. Sometimes we have to kind of, make the team aware of the importance of why, and that defines the purpose of that particular.
Absolutely. And that should be the basis of your acceptance test.
Absolutely.
That's what acceptance testing is about. Did we achieve the why, not just the what? Yes.
So that's something. And sometimes, the best practice is to vertically slice the story when it comes to slicing and when it comes to refinement. But again, because of the size or the humongous requirement and the cross dependencies to deliver, to fulfill that acceptance, what happens is it'll become a challenge. It is a challenge to kind of slice the stories in a righteous
manner. Very cool. Yeah, too much. Here's a front end story. Here's a back end story, and somehow miracles happen and they connect. Yeah, this is called inappropriate team design. We don't have front-end teams and we don't have back-end teams. We have a team that works on front-end and back-end concurrently. And there shouldn't be the back-end running away from the team and vice versa. But we all know that these are things that take time to fix. Thank you. Some great stories, great problems down the front here too.
Adding to her, like she told, a more number of information is added can lead to the no development for the team. But I had observed that when there are one-liner comments sometimes just given, and those are so ambiguous, like we don't know what to do. It's just a one-liner straight, like just develop a button on which feature what. So sometimes the little bit elaboration of the story is needed. Why part, basically making team aware of the big picture is the main criteria. Otherwise team feel lack of the contribution, they don't feel collaborated, and there might be a time only where your BA and your POs are contributing to the user story, and team feel very reluctant to contribute at one side of table. And I think one more you want to add is something about stakeholder that we don't pass this user story to stakeholder and transfer this.
Possibly. But I thought of something else now. One thing we commonly notice is people hiding behind a story called a spike. So
it's just a spike.
We don't know much about it. We need to do a spike, and they pretty much finish the implementation under a spike. So that's something we've seen.
Yeah, nice one. All right, over here. What was some? Thank you.
So all of the above, what they said, they covered pretty much everything. And one addition to that is there is one unique setting where we have a person in our group who is working in a technical team, so the platform team. So the acceptance criteria is what they want from us to start writing their stories. They write the stories themselves, which they can understand. It's too technical, no user perspective, like it was already said. The other thing is, all of us agree that
values missing. Yep. Not enough, and that's another, again, that's why I love teaching POs and BAs. That's what I specialise in. Yes, I can teach Scrum Master stuff, that's easy stuff. It's the PO and BA, because I did hear a little bit of your conversation, and that's where I came from. I had a software package I looked after. I had 120 clients with 1,000 plus users. I can't have them in the workshop. My job is to talk to all those. So a product owner or BA or whoever you want to call them, because there's not just Scrum in the universe. I'm putting it out there. There is an actual defined role for an Agile BA, and I'm here to stick up for that. That person needs to have 1 foot in the team and 1 foot with their users and customers. And that's their whole purpose in life, is to consult with them, figure out all what their dreams and hopes and wishes are, distill them into some sort of prioritised way of consuming it so the team can deliver. And when that's the wrong person who doesn't do that, and they're making it up based on their own fantasies, we're going to have products that fulfill no requirements, which is terrible. Nice, terrible, but yes, nice problem to have, no.
Yeah, and the last point I would like to highlight is two of us four have defined who will be writing the user stories, anyone in the team. One, we are copy pasting whatever the requirements, single lines as a user story.
Yes.
I have a team where always the BSA magically creates them.
Yes. And they happen in isolation. Yeah, one of the biggest problems. All right, last table to share some other ones that you might have had.
Hi. So I think pretty much everybody has covered it. So adding to that points, we might see the dependency with the cross-functional teams. I mean, the same user story will be scoped, but we'll be having the multiple dependencies with other teams. We see those challenges in our company basically.
Yes,
Yeah, and
really common.
adding that, we might see that the developers or the functional QAs which they'll be doing it, they might not analyze the complete requirement which has been given by the POs or the BAs, and they start the sprint as in when the sprint is running upon, they might be coming up with this is I have not understood this.
Yep.
Yeah, these we are
Absolutely.
seeing these challenges pretty much more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is, all of these things are so common. There's every team. So problems too big is that I didn't hear anybody say that too much, but that's the biggest one I see. They're too big. They come into the sprint and we put them in the sprint, and then suddenly halfway through the sprint we go, oh, that was too big. So no one's really worked together to make sure they're small enough. Quality criteria missing, or the opposite problem, quality criteria being added mid-sprint, and hang on, actually it needs to do this and this and this and this. So stuff gets added as you go. The vagueness, which we talked about, represents a non-deliverable. My biggest. Different teams have different terminology and different ways of working. I'm focusing on user stories, but I know that sometimes you do need text stories or spikes. That's not what we're talking about in this workshop. We're really talking about requirements from the point of view of the product, capabilities from the user's point of view. Too much detail. So the opposite of vague is too much. As you said, you're boxed into a corner. We don't have any opportunity to explore the best method. And how many user stories do you have that are just a task for the dev team to do? It's not a user story. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think we need to perhaps be clear. This is a user story. This is a tech story. And in a text story, there's another format you might want to use. You say, in order for us to deliver X, the team needs to do Y. So change the format. It's not a user story format anymore. As a dev, I want to create a new index on it. No, you don't. And the worst one, of course, is it's not understood, which is the underlying factor of nearly all of yours. Because a user story shouldn't be written in a sprint plan. There should have been discussion about it in prior sprints as far as the backlog refinement process, or in the initial envisionment stage of the project. We don't start a project and start sprinting. Now, some of you, in fact, many of you are probably working in a team where it's an existing product and you're just doing continuous enhancements and continue. That's fine, the DevOps there, but there still needs to be a chance to sit down and look at stuff from big picture and intent and end to end. So we're not looking at what, you've heard that saying, we cannot see the forest for the trees. That means we're looking at the detail, but we don't see the interaction between them. We don't see the big picture, but we must be able to see the big picture. And something that every team member needs to have is what I call multifocal glasses. Close up, the individual story, how they interact in a feature, and then how does that interact in the whole product vision. So everyone in the team should have those three pictures, the big picture, how they relate to a particular feature, and then the individual thing it is. So these are things that are easy for me to talk about, but that's what your Scrum Masters and your coaches should be encouraging you to change your team design and the way that you create and talk about, so it is collaborative. The problem also, which I haven't put up there, unfortunately, we do have devs, and I'm sure you've worked with one or more of them that tell you, when you've got the story finished, give it to me. I don't want to hear about it until you've done it. Well, that's a problem that we need to really work on. That's one of the biggest anti-patterns of all, because they're waiting for that perfect specification before they'll touch it, and then you wonder why they've misinterpreted it or they've misestimated. They haven't been part of the discussion. It's a user story, not a user requirement. If that's the way you want to work, stop calling them user stories and just call them requirements. Go back. All right, and it won't deliver value. Here we go. Here's some examples. How many of you see this? As a user, I want security, so I know my data is safe. As a manager, I want reporting so I can see if we're making a profit. That's a bit vague. As a customer, I want to order books so I can get books. I've seen all of these. These are real stories. As a developer, I want to create a new table so we can have pricing data, developer tasks, as we said. As a customer, I want to enter my details so I can see my details. The why is the same as the what. Not sure. As a user, I want it to be easy to use. Yeah, well, that's clearly the whole UX in one story. Yes, we can do that. And I'm sure that if I went into your Jiras or to your DevOps or to whatever platform you use, I'm sure I'll find at least a dozen or two similar. And Jira is never the problem. Jira, you've got to understand, is nothing more than a repository, garbage in, garbage out. We should never blame Jira for this problem. It is the people who put the stuff in Jira. All right, so we know that user stories come in all shapes and sizes. And that's why we have the words epic and feature or capability or whatever terms that your teams use. So who can tell me what's the difference between an epic and a user story in your world? Epic's a milestone. Interesting. Wow. Okay, I'd love to see your teams. Any others? Epic is a theme. Yeah, nice. And we have themes, features, capabilities, epics. There's so many terms and different teams use them differently, so it could be a theme. Yep. A whole project is an epic. See, isn't it fascinating that even within the room, we've got so many different versions. And that's cool, actually. There's no such thing as an epic. In my mind, the only way I explain an epic to anyone, because they hear, oh, there's all this agile stuff, there's stories and epics. And an epic is too big for a sprint. That's it. Now, is it a whole project? That's definitely too big for a sprint. Or is it a theme that's too big for a sprint? Or is it a particular stage that we say, at this point, we're going to be ready to release an MVP or the next release or whatever it might be. So there's lots and lots of different terms. And that's what I say, well, they're all user stories in different sizes. And I don't care whether you use Martian or Cleon terminology. It's either too big for a sprint or it's not. And it's all about how do we break them down. And that's really the point of this course. They can represent all sorts of requirements, back-end, front-end. Again, back-end and front-end requirements really don't exist in a weird way because it's usually you're doing it for the user, and that includes the UX as well as the interface layers and all the rest of it. They should be together. Well, yep. Yeah. Yeah, epics have been around long too. And then I have this debate. Is it epic, then feature, then story? Or is it feature, epic, story? Or is it theme, task, story? I don't know the answer. As I said, so, and that's exactly the point. Different authors, different software, all call them, if I was to hold up a rose and call it a shoe, does it change that being a rose? It's still a rose. It doesn't matter what I call it. And I have to say that this workshop, I don't care what you call them, I'm going to focus on stories, which is what we defined earlier today. Whether you call them epics or projects or milestones or themes or whatever, it doesn't matter. If it's too big for a sprint, it is not a story. Call them anything you like. Jira does use epics, but you can configure Jira to make them call them stuff. You can change that. Your Jira admin can change that if they wanted to call it anything they want. Yep, go ahead. Go ahead, yes. And
whatever you rename it, it's becoming only one. You choose that
The interface will go with you.
Yeah, it's all just a config in Jira. And honestly, that's why I wanted to bring this up, that they can represent all sorts of requirements from different points of view, and they're all sorts of different sizes. But I'm talking very specifically about one specific thing that we're going to deliver in a sprint. And not only are we delivering it in a sprint, we're going to deliver it meeting its acceptance criteria, its done criteria, back end, front end, and UX. It is done in a sprint. We don't have a separate extra sprint for it. We should be, but this is ideal world, of course. So how many of you have heard of DEEP, as in the acronym for how we must be viewing our backlogs? It's an oldie but a goodie. I've heard 3 different authors quoted as coming up with this, so I'm not sure which one's the right one. But I was taught this way. You start off with the whole product that everybody sees. Here's the new app. Here's the new CRM. Here's the new finance system. Here's the new whatever it is. And we break it down at the beginning into big chunks. Features, epics, whatever you want to call them. Stuff, big chunks. And those big chunks, we should then say, well, which ones are we going to prioritize? And then the ones that are prioritized, we break down into smaller chunks. So, and then those smaller chunks, we figure out, well, which ones do we prioritize, which ones we're going to do in the next few sprints, and then we break them down. So the acronym DEEP stands for D for detailed appropriately. That means the stuff that's coming up now is fully detailed. We've got good detailed acceptance criteria. We've gone through some perhaps UX discussions. We've talked about front-end, back-end, cross dependencies. We've got lots and lots of detail there. But the stuff that's coming up next year, next quarter, it's sitting there as a great big chunk of, it's way too big for a sprint, and it hasn't got detail because it's not a priority for us in the immediate future. We'll break them down as we go. So the detail increases as the priority increases. We don't add all the detail up front. So that's the D. The first E is emergent. It is expected to become clearer and more detailed and more well understood over time. You're not meant to know 1,500 user stories in Jira and understand every single one in detail. I always used to call it the top 20. My top 20 user stories were the only ones we really talked about. The ones that were below there were placeholders that as we did more backlog refinement, they would be refined accordingly. Which brings us to the next one. There should be estimatable. There should be enough so we can say, well, that's gigantic. It's going to be too big for a sprint. And then the estimates are refined as you go. As you break them up, they then get re-estimated in their chunks. And of course, it must be prioritized. So the level of detail and the priority go together. The higher the priority, the higher the detail. The lower the priority, the bigger, the more vague they are. And a product owner and a business analyst job with the team as part of backlog refinement is to talk about these things. What are the priorities? What's the level of detail? And we should be doing that at least one sprint in advance of when that story comes into a sprint. We don't come into a sprint with the story never being seen by the team. The team should be well and truly aware of that story, would have seen it come up through the backlog over time. They might have been there as part of the discussions to split an epic into individual stories, which is the best way to do it. Because when I'm splitting stories by myself as a BA, I might split them in what I think makes sense, but then the developer goes, no, we can't do them separately, they need to be together. So we need to think about how do we work on them together. So understanding a backlog ideally should be no more than 100 items in your backlog. That means the top 20 or top 50 are stories, and then underneath that are the big chunks that will split up and elaborate when we need to based on the priority of the work. How many of you got a Jira ticket list of hundreds and thousands? How can you manage this? No, the most superhero product owner, BA in the universe, cannot manage a list of 500 tickets and expect to prioritize, oh, well, these ones are good. The ones, I guarantee you, there's ones there that have, there's always duplicates, no question, but there's stuff in there that are just like, oh, Joe at the stand-up said something, so I'll just chuck it into a Jira ticket. I definitely encourage you, and I'm not here to talk about Jira, I'm not a Jira pro by any chance, but classify your tickets as this is a user story, this is a technical story, and separate out your backlogs accordingly and figure out the interdependencies. But that's not what we're here for. So the idea is that you start off with the big picture, break it into small, and then only break the important high priority stuff into smaller and smaller. And that is a continuous job. You're doing that every sprint as part of your preparation for future sprints. So as you start knocking off the high priority stuff, you start breaking down the next stuff in preparation. And it's a continuous kind of what we often refer to, and again, Shane Hastie and Robert Aldoff came up with the concept of the rock crusher. You know, a rock crusher, if you go to a mining site or a construction site, big rocks go in and they get crushed, and then smaller over time. And that's what it is. As the small ones come out, the bigger ones get crushed as you go. So there needs to be a continuous stream of stories being written together, broken down as needed, and as you deliver, you start breaking down more. And it's a continuous kind of pipeline instead of 100,000 small stories. That's never going to work. No good product owner ever going to be able to manage that. We also need to think about what makes a story ready. How many of you have got a clear definition of ready? Yep, one in the whole room, a definition of ready. How many of you have got a definition of done? Oh, thank goodness there's a few of them. Then I would have been really ready to run out the door. All right, so definition of ready is something that we need to really think about as well. And the team must be clear of when is the story ready to come into a sprint and when is it not. And every team will have their own version of definition of ready, because different teams have different platforms and different environments and different everything. But there should be a clear idea of how. There should be do we decide the how before the sprint as part of our sprint refinement? Do we do it at the sprint plan, which is my preference if I possibly can? But there might be a combination of both. Where the situation of a story I'm to try and think what the exact word, but I'm going to say as a user, I need to accept the terms and conditions of use of this app so that I pass my legal requirements. You know that one, that to access this, you must read all this text and hit yes, I agree before they'll let you onto the platform. You know, one of those privacy. So that story, if you're a technical developer, how much effort would this be? It's an if statement. If check, go. If not, error message. I could code that in my sleep. Because I haven't coded for a good 10 years, but I could still do it. But hang on a minute. How do we finish that story? How about all that text, all that legal jargon from your lawyers about T's and C's and accessing this and rights and proprietary and you use your data? Who gives you that information? The legal team. So you come into the sprint, here's our T's and C's story. Developer goes, one story point, I'll have it done tomorrow. And then we go, hang on a minute, we need the text. I'll go to my legal department. Hey, legal department, can you give me the T's and C's? What are they going to tell me? Talk to the hand. Give me 3 weeks. We'll think about it. So when we think about ready, we need to think about, well, some stories, we might need to do research and gather data, business rules, text, confirm UX, confirm design overall. Some of that needs to be done before we come into the sprint. But other stories, we can figure them out in the sprint. How late can we figure out the detail and how much time in advance do we need to prepare? So being ready needs to be clear about how much elaboration, how much detail is added, how much do we need before the sprint and how much can we figure out in the sprint. So there needs to be a constant discussion because every user story has different levels of complexity. The more complex it is, chances are the more preparation you're going to have to give it before it comes into a sprint. So until everybody's happy that, yes, we've got everything we need so we can do it in the sprint now, it should never come to be pulled into a sprint. The reason why this course exists is about understanding it needs to be small enough. It needs to be split small enough to create value and be deliverable in a sprint and meet all the expected quality criteria. And of course, just in time, JIT, good old just in time. Too much detail early is why waterfall doesn't work. All the detail you see, who's actually worked waterfall? I find this is another thing that I'm seeing. People who've never worked waterfall, I'm like, yes. I worked waterfall, still happens out there, where waterfall was all the detailed specifications of every single part of the system was detailed with every single possibility and permutation combination, the text size, the font, the Pantone color, the position on the screen of the error message, all that was decided before a single line of code was written. And the reason that doesn't work, things change. So just in time is all about, based on our priority, we add the detail. We don't have detail early because what we learned last month and what happened from the last sprint feedback means that what we learned last month is now wrong. We should better throw it away. So we don't want all that detail too early because it's probably going to change and it will just create waste. And generally speaking, it causes expectation management to be poor because we've detailed it early. So importantly, there's many different versions of what makes ready for a team. Different teams have different versions. It could be about where it's documented, how it's documented, sign-offs. There could be all sorts of things. The UX guys approved it. Whatever it is, we need to be clear about what makes it ready, and everyone's clear that we don't pull it in. And in fact, your backlog should be clear about stories that are ready and stories that are not ready. And you don't even look at the ones that are ready. They don't come into a sprint. So I always think of stories being a little bit like our good old friend Goldilocks. How many are familiar with the Goldilocks story? A little girl breaks into a house where 3 bears have gone out for a walk, and she goes in and there's food on the table, and one plate of food was too hot and the other plate was too cold, and then one was just right, so she ate it all. And then she got tired, she goes into the bedroom, and one bed was very hard and one bed was too soft and one was just right. User stories a bit like that too. Can't be too big. We need to be able to brush them down small enough as needed. They can't be too small. They can't just be a task. In fact, the biggest issue I have when I'm teaching new BAs or new product owners about stories is that they see them as a task. It's a task for the user, but not a task for the team. It's the user task, sure, but not a team task. It shouldn't be that small. It must be valuable to the user. So small enough to create value, but not so big that it can't be done. So it needs to be not too early. Too much detail too early creates waste, and not too late. We don't have the detail, we start a sprint and, we didn't have that business rule, then we can't complete it in the sprint. So every story you need to think about, too much, too little, what's right. That's coming up with the definition of ready. Oh, gosh, time flies when you're having fun. So the 3 S's, to get to the 3 S's. Now, I've read a million books on the topic. Reading books about user story writing does not improve your user story writing. Does not at all. All those old CCC, Invest, all that stuff, does not improve story writing. So over the years and years and years I've been playing and reading all sorts of different information, I summarised down how do we know a story is ready? And that's what the 3 S's are for: guidance. So the first S is it's meant to be a simple sentence. Simple. And a simple sentence is the opposite of a complex sentence, which is, single iteration, specific outcome. They're the 3 S's. I'm going to go through one by one. Simple in single iteration. So a simple statement means there's no ands. As a user, I want to update and something. Straight away, we've got 2 stories. If as soon as I've or when or if, any of those types of statements mean it's not a one simple thought. It's not a one thoughter. There's multiple thoughts here. Therefore, there's at least 2 stories or multiple. No ands. It needs to be clear and succinct to everybody what it is. It should be very small. And one thought, one idea, one scenario, one option. Yes, all our systems are complex with many different users and many different scenarios, but each one is its own user story. So as a student, I want to view and download the course details so I can understand the course learning outcomes. View and download. Well, one's a view, one's a download, two stories. And they both might be one-pointers and they both might be done the same, but we can focus on getting one done and then the next one done. And in fact, your product owner might say, let's make it viewable as a priority. Download, we might do later. That might not be part of my MVP. Viewing on screen, MVP, download, they can happen release too. So they can be separately prioritized too, because they're completely different requirements. The next S is it's a single interaction. And when I think about a single interaction, especially on a phone, because that's what half of our things are these days, I think of a single interaction between the person, the user, and the system. One interaction, one press, one character, not one character, one field. It should be one thing, not 5 button presses. If you've got 5 button presses, that's 5 interactions, right? So when we think of a single interaction between the user and the solution, one interaction, one point, not a whole process end to end, no more than one step of a process is what it should be. And alternatives and error cases, edge cases, all of them form separate user stories because they're separate scenarios. So as a student, I want to enroll in the course so I can become a SCM. I know there's so many certifications. Enrolling in a course is not one interaction. There is a process there. So we might say, I want to create a student ID, I want to enter my address, blah, 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 blah. You break down that process into each individual step. I worked for a finance company and we were doing credit checks on customers applying for mortgages. Every field on that screen, because when you're applying, every field was a separate user story. Now, the developers screened it first, but then I said, well, look at all these business rules. If they say X here, then you need those screens. If they say Y there, every scenario, field by field, had so many different rules that we had to break them down that small, so they could be delivered one by one. Now, okay, first name and surname got delivered together because it made sense, but the last one, which is what we've already covered, there should be an outcome. There must be clear value. There must be a result that's observable and testable. If we don't have that, we don't have a user story. So the outcome may or may not be to the customer or user, and that's okay. And sometimes I hear all sorts of crazy words. As a user, I want to click the terms and conditions acceptance button so that my company is compliant with the law. No, it's stupid wording. It doesn't make sense. It's not always to the end user. And it could be about quality, standard, and compliance. For example, as a student, I want 2-factor authentication so that, why? As a student, I don't care about 2-factor authentication, do I? Who cares about 2-factor authentication? Probably your security team or whoever they are. So as a compliance officer, I want students to set up 2-factor authentication. And you know what? Suddenly I can see the value of this story because it's not the value to the user, it's the value to the organization. So when we're thinking about how we're writing our user stories, we need to think about who is obtaining that value and do it from their perspective. Because when you start writing, as a student, I want it, they don't really want it. It doesn't make sense. The wording makes it harder to understand. Here we can be clear. It's a compliance standard, and the developers all understand it together. All right, so I've put those earlier user stories that I showed you on the screen. I've put them on the screen again, and I'm looking at I thought I was going to have a much bigger screen. So feel free to come closer if you need to. Your job now is to take these user stories from before, which is the ones that I showed you as bad user stories, and based on what we've talked about, your job is to rewrite them, thinking about are they a simple statement? Are they a single interaction? And do they have a specific outcome? rewrite them so they do, and you'll probably need some creative license. So work with your teams or work individually. There's some sticky notes and you've got pencils to write. See if you can rewrite these user stories to make sure they do comply with my SSS. Before I do that, any questions? I might just quickly double check. All right, away you go. See if you can rewrite these stories so that they are deliverable in a sprint. Pick any of them that you've got. I'm just looking at how much time I've got. Perfect. It's 3:30, isn't it? 3:30. And you can be creative because some of them make assumptions, put them in a context that makes sense for you because some of them are quite vague specifically. No.
So it's like posting user, maybe answer security.
Well, we think about, what is the specific interaction? What is the interaction there? That's probably where you need to look at that. What is the interaction happening between the user and the solution? So what's that interaction? But what's the user doing that they need security for? So you might say, as a user, I want to save my data securely, because you can't deliver security. You can say, oh, that's like acceptance criteria, really? Yeah. So you need to start thinking about what's the interaction that you need security for, because security is not a deliverable.
Yeah.
It's not a deliverable. It's acceptance criteria. So what is the deliverable there? So having...
Maybe it's like I want to authenticate something.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Just try and see it. I was expecting a much bigger screen because I thought if I had them all to be able to read them. Oh, yep, all right, here we go. Yep. Yeah, of course. Which one? Because it's not a user story. What's the user? What's the interaction? It's simple. It's a single statement, but what is the specific what's the interaction here between the user and the solution? There is no user interaction. No. Like I said before, I'm talking about user stories, not tech stories. So actually that's a tech task. It's not a user story at all. So how do you relate that? You have to create it. So maybe pricing. So maybe as a user I want to see pricing data. So you're going to have to really stretch a little bit, make some assumptions. Yeah, you might have to change perspective. Yeah, you got it. About UX. Yes. UX is in the team, with the team, talking with the team all the time. It's beyond you. I know it's end to end. But this is the problem, that people don't see the end to end and they don't see it. No. No. That's the problem.
It's not a problem, it's a way of working. It's okay to have that. It's okay that it takes 4 weeks to write the T's and C's.
Yeah.
I don't find reality, but if you're not able to integrate those alternate, those other timelines, because we're on 2 weeks, it needs to be done in 2 weeks, then we're not. Then we're fighting reality. To fight reality, you have to.
Yeah, true. But It's all about getting ready. Is a story ready? Is the UX understood of the story? Yes, no. Yes, then we can deliver it. No, we can't deliver it.
Working on the UX, whatever it is, maybe it's a wireframe, maybe it's no wireframe.
No, maybe it's a process.
There's no wireframe,
No.
but there are guidelines for this. First of all, fitting it as we will do the UX and development on the same ticket and in the same sprint. We'll just pass it to one another, just like I would pass it to QA so that QA verifies my work.
No.
So by the rule should be UX done up front. The thinking is done up front so that we can think about the coding, the delivery, the implementing, the fitting with the rest of the technicalities. That's a very discussion too. Well, should it be version?
Oh, that's it. That's definition of ready. And every team is different. Ready for development or not. Ready for a sprint or not. And that's where the UX should be. That's where UX has can't go. It's not. It shouldn't go into a sprint. It can't go. The rule is, if it's not ready, it cannot be brought into a sprint. That's the way I've always. If it's not ready, it can't come into a sprint. Bad luck. And that means my BAs, POs, UX, whoever is stuffed up, and we have to kick them up the bum. So that's what it's called.
And I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
If I give you a chicken,
It's not ready. It's not ready. Come back.
this is a chicken, so we're already.
Beautiful analogy.
Butter is faster than about what needs to be there and how it needs to be there, and instructions and coding. We're going to end up coding stuff, plus enough, and then delivery, and then there'll be the spin, and then you get developers go and say, it's like, I've redone this the details for 17 times, and then like, I'm sorry, we should hope you're like feedback, we don't have feedback, and e-learning.
Which is fine to have feedback, but there should be an upfront guide before we get to, oh, it should be blue. Oh, no, it's magenta. No, it's this Pantone color. Oh, actually, that doesn't match the others too. It's not, as you said, it's not just look and feel. It needs to be experience, the flow, how's it going to make you feel. I mean, journey maps. Journey maps should be walked through before we even start story writing. But, hey, I'm talking to preaching to the converted. I know that it's often the developers get a story after they've come from outer space, magic has happened, and here's the story, make it happen now. And they're like, but how does that sit? And they just see the tree. They don't understand where that tree is within the forest, or even the forest. Yes, it's on. Yeah, so yeah, that's all right. Oh, I've got 10 minutes. All right.
Yeah, the first one, right? As a user, I want security so that I know my data is safe, right? That's the
How did you
user
rewrite?
story. Yeah, we rewrote as a user. I want a multi-factor authentication implemented so that when I log in, I know my data is safe.
Perhaps, yes. So you might say, as a user, I want to log in so that I can access the system. By the way, it needs to be secure with multi-factor authentication. Actually, that's acceptance criteria. The user story is the interaction. I'm logging in, I'm making a payment, I'm saving my details. These are all interactions that the user's doing, and security needs to be a quality acceptance criteria on that. And it should be part of the definition of done, so everything. So the interaction would be the user's action, and this would be the, again, making sure that, yes, they can log in, but also security is part of that login process. Nice.
If I may ask, did we cover all the 3 S's here?
So is it a simple statement, as a user, I want to log in so that I can access? Yes. Is it one single interaction? A login is usually one.
Login, yeah.
And is it an outcome? Yes, I can access the system.
Yeah.
That's the outcome. Security is a quality aspect of that outcome. Good stuff. All right, as a developer, this could be, I mean, this is one that you could have gone absolutely crazy on because it would have taken a lot of assumptions. How do we go with the, as a developer, I want to create a new table so we have pricing data? I helped you guys with this one.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Okay.
We took the liberty of going creative with this, as you
Nice.
suggested. We said, as a user, we need visibility on product pricing so that I can make purchase decisions.
Perfect. Exactly. So the user interaction is I'm seeing the price of the goods, and the developer says, well, for me to deliver that, I have to create a new table. That's a developer task that would come out in the sprint planning. Oh, to deliver that user story for the user to see the pricing, we need new pricing data. Perfect. All right, as a manager, I see this all the time. As a manager, I want reporting.
Yeah, as a manager, I want to generate quarterly performance report.
Yeah.
I can see whether it's going
Even a Q quality profit report. Is a report a single interaction? I have this, no way. So if you're running a report, what's the first thing that happens? Select your sort order. Every single one of those is a single interaction. I want to select the date range. I want to select the sort order. I want to select the region. 1, 2, 3 user stories. And then the report. Is the report itself one user story? No. You've got the heading, you've got the subtotals, you've got the groupings, you've got the individual columns of data. User story, user story, user story, user story. Yeah. Oh, that's fonts are actually acceptance criteria. So when we think of a report, a single report could be 10, 20, 30 user stories because each data set being displayed or totaled or subtotaled or grouped or summarized, each of those is a user story. And then a report can come together. You might take 4 sprints for every single component, all the selection criteria, and then how about all the graphics? I want it shown in a pie chart. I want to show it in a bar chart. I want to show it in these colors. I want to change the colors. User stories, every single one of them. Every single one of them. As a customer, I want to order books. Well, order books is an end-to-end process. I reckon you could probably have, 20, 30 user stories from that one?
Yeah, I think that's part of the challenge. Would we end up with too many user stories that the idea of creating the user stories is too much.
And that's where, going back to, I can't find it quickly enough. Dun, 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 dun. Deep is the problem there. So the idea is, so here's, I want to order books. That's the next thing we're going to focus on as a team, and then we split just that one up. So then all the other big stories are still parked. Now we split just that one big feature up. And so the small stories is only based on that one feature. We don't have 15 features all broken up. We just have the order books split up. So we only split those ones up as we need it. And even within ordering the books, you might say, well, what are the major stages? There might be your big chunks, and then you only split up the ones you're going to work on immediately and then split them up as you go. So splitting them up is a continuous process. Instead of splitting every feature up all up front, you split them up only as that feature is the priority to work on now. So you don't end up with thousands. Oops.
The report for creating return of investment could be very straightforward, but are we saying one choosing the color, one for each of those components?
Potentially. I mean, again, the right answer about user stories, if they're too small, is the dev team need to say that's sensible to be done separately than something else. So if the dev says, well, doing colours is a big enough story, because that can be quite complex. When you think of, selecting, if you've got a chart and you've got 5 pieces of data and you're giving your users the option to select the colours of each piece of data, that's a lot of dev work. Certainly one sprint, yeah. So you need to really work about, can that be done in a sprint? Yes, no. No, well then it probably needs to be split. Yes, it's small enough. So that conversation, the 3 C's, is also really important. As a user, I want it to be easy to use. Well, what is easy to use? I want the login to be easy to use. I want the report to be easy to use. I want the pricing data to be easily used. So last point to summarise, existing techniques for those of you who are existing BAs, POs, and all of those wonderful analytic people, existing techniques do not need to be thrown out bathwater with the baby. You still use them. And they're wonderful places to still find your user stories. I was talking to Sophie about this just now. There's all those existing tools, and whether they're waterfall or whatever you want to call them, still valuable and an easy way for the team to look at these models and these easy tools and come up with the stories together. Process flows or journey maps, I mean, they're slightly different, of course. A process flow, every step of a process flow could be a separate user story. Each decision gateway could be a separate user story. And in fact, every event, if you've got events, if you're a bit of a BPMN person, I'm also a BPMN person. Wow, the dying art of writing BPM. But anyway, so each of those could be a separate story. So don't give up on flowcharting. Don't give up, and same with UX. UX stuff is all about customer journey mapping. Each point and many points of a journey map could be separate user stories. Do them up front and then find your stories in them. Use cases. How many of you remember use cases? Poor Alistair Coburn's probably crying because I learnt use cases. That's how I learnt a lot of my BA work. So a use case, every step of a use case, if you think of the primary flow, each step is a story. Each alternate flow is potentially a separate story as well. And our data models. We've got our data analysts and our data architects, and they write their models. In fact, there's 1 million stories in your data models. CRUD, how many remember, do you know what CRUD stands for?
Complex, risky, unknown, and...
Ooh, I'm learning something cool. No, so CRUD with data, maybe create data, read data, update data, delete data. Do we actually delete data anymore? We used to. When I was on a 3060 mainframe and we had 64 Ks of disk space. 64 Ks of disk space. We're never going to need that much. So we deleted stuff left, right and centre. Nowadays, it's unlimited, it's in the cloud. But a create is a user story, a read is a user story, an update is a user story, a delete or archive is a user story. Every element of each table could be a separate user story based on how it's created, how it's read, how it's updated, how it might be archived. The relationships, how do we form relationships between the customer and the order? That relationship building. Also, have you heard about ruin? Relationships being ruined. So relationships being updated, related. Oh gosh, I'm talking of this. There's another CRUD acronym for relationships. Anyway, data dictionary. When you think about your data dictionaries, they're still such valuable artifacts. That's going to tell you a lot about different stories, about all the different scenarios that happen to that data, because data is its own entity. That's why we call them entity models, of course. So you start thinking about all that stuff could be forming user stories. So our 3 S's, a simple sentence, no ands, no ahs, a single interaction between the person who's getting the value, the user, and the solution, and it's an outcome that creates value to that person, to the organisation. My slides, I believe, were uploaded. I have made small updates to them. I will get them uploaded, but they will be downloadable for you. And there's plenty of stuff. If you find me on the interwebs. I am on LinkedIn. You always can get in touch and I can talk to you more about this stuff. No time for questions, but you can definitely find me out there because afternoon tea is being served and our next sessions will be starting in 15. Oh, we have got a couple of questions. Oh, good stuff. Excellent. Go ahead, Sophie. Excuse me.
I've seen teams game stories to play a bigger game, which is the velocity game and the look, I'm doing stuff game. Can you talk a little bit about when stories are too small or when they're too big? I know you said it out, but when I hear you describing, a field, a free text entry field is a story, I'm like, ooh. Then you say, yeah, but finance, we're checking that field, lots of rules. I'm like, in that context, yes. But entering, for example, I'm buying a data plan, new data plan for my mobile phone. I want to enter my billing details. this is where I'm like, if I give the developers each story as a field, we're starting to be tiny. Whereas that thing is not done until our billing department has the full billing details.
Yes, absolutely. So there is, again, every system has all sorts of complications. That's why that conversation, the 3 C's, can't be forgotten. It's a conversation that's happening as you're writing the stories. So if your dev team are in the room, they're going to say, that's one story, or no, that's too big, it needs to be split. Or conversely, if it's too big, it needs to be split. If it's too small, no, it's too granular. I used to work for a water board in Melbourne, and we had to put pipes in your house and connect them to the water system. They had to be compliant pipes. So we created an app for our plumbers and our construction people so they knew which items were compliant and what they could be using. Because there's actually, in Australia, we have sewer, potable water and recyclable water. So, and different things were certified in different types of water. So our users, when we were brainstorming how they want to search, we came up with 15 different searches. And I put them as separate user stories. My dev team had a heart attack. And I said, well, actually, we need these 3 for MVP. But they wanted to do them all in one sprint. I said, no. I want these 3 in the first sprint, so MVP can be out in a few weeks. The extra searches we'll worry about later. So it also needs to be thought about in priority and MVP. Now, in the search scenario, having 3 searches was MVP, but in your example, if that data all isn't complete, it's not ready. But that might take 3 sprints to get all that data done because there could be complicated business rules and interactions of this piece of data versus that piece. And again, that's what we dealt with at Vita, which is a Vita, yeah, and it was named after the Indian Vitas, this particular company by some Indian people. Vita said, well, if the user clicks this button, then they need extra information. So because of the interplay of all those business rules, they became separate stories, but other stories were a couple of fields together because there wasn't any complex business rules behind them. So sometimes there's a lot of those things that are going to tell you whether it is or is not a user story that's small enough or too big.
The most common pushback we get for that approach is the context switching.
Yeah. This is what I love. So what we do, the dev team control the priorities. The dev team do what makes sense to them, what they think is low-hanging fruit, what they think makes sense. That's easiest for the dev team. And then, by the way, we've run out of time, we've hit the deadline, and we haven't delivered what the user needs. This is great, but the dev team sorted. The dev team's got what they wanted. They didn't have to context switch. They did all the easy stuff. But hang on, we're out of time or budget. It's the priority is controlled by the product owner in terms of value, dependencies aside. But yes, I hear this all the time. And I'm like, well, that's great. We've got a deadline to go through. And what you think is context switching, those requirements are not priority for this MVP or for this release or for this build, whatever you want to call all those, because there's a million different versions. So we need to really be bringing people together and saying, if the product owner is made aware that if we separate those stories and they're done in separate sprints or separate releases, the rework. So we need to make sure the conversation between the devs to say, hey, product owner, BA, if we separate them, then it's going to be extra work later, versus if we do them together now, it's going to be quicker. And let the product owner make a decision on, well, that means I'll get a low priority feature in now, which might save me later, or they go, no, I want this priority feature in. I understand what you're saying, and I'll deal with the extra time in the next release. It's got to be talked about. Nothing goes wrong with that.
Thank you, Kathy.
Right,
yeah. So there's there'll be a.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. No, thank you.
I just want to quickly announce, we would like everybody to proceed to Grand Ballroom 1. There's some contest announcements that's going to happen. So we can just proceed.
Thank you. That's I live. That's where I live. I'll go across the road. Anyway. Good. Yeah, really good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, thank you.